What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Real Reviews with SOC. I hope and pray you guys are doing well. If this is your first time here, I would like to personally welcome you over to Real Reviews, where we examine film and media through a Christian lens, and we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in both film and media. So if this is your first time here, again, make sure you smash that like button, hit the subscribe button, and if you like deep conversations about lighthearted topics, just go ahead and subscribe. So today we're going to be talking about a film by the name of Silent Hill. Silent Hill is a 2006 psychological horror film directed by Christophe Gans and written by Roger Avary, based on the video game series of the same name published by Konami. The film follows Rose, who takes her adopted daughter Sharon to the town of Silent Hill, for which Sharon cries while sleepwalking. Rose is involved in a car accident near the town and awakens to find Sharon missing. While searching for her daughter, she fights a local cult and begins to uncover Sharon's connection to the town's dark past. So, as we continue into season 4's cult series, basically what we're doing is examining a bunch of films and documentaries and docuseries dealing with cult. And we'll get deep down into the conversation today as we continue on. So, of course, as you all know, I do not do this alone. I am joined by my really cool panel of real reviewers. Let's say hello to them. What's going on, people?
Yep.
All right, Nate, you need a sound effect. There you go. That's going to be your sound effect every time now. Okay. So, Alfredo, how you doing, man? How's it going?
I'm chilling, man. I'm here, ready to talk about this lackluster film that you made me watch.
I didn't make nobody watch it, but thank you for your honesty. Michelle Turner, what's going on? Says, how are you? Awesome. Oh my goodness. You guys, listen, if you don't want to be here, it's okay. You can leave. You can leave. I promise you it's okay. Oh my goodness. Whatever. All right. Nate, how's it going, bro? How are you?
Man, I waited to the last minute to watch this, so I was watching this right before I went to bed last night, which somehow I always manage to do that when it's something like this. I did that same thing with The Exorcist, so you do the math. And I didn't even really understand what was going on, so my review was probably going to be as silent as the hill.
Oh, ha, ha, doo-doo-shh. I like it. I like it. Let's say what's up to our one audience member. Shout out to the Revelator. What's going on? He says, good evening all here. Already shared. Let's bring in the crowds. Yeah, they're not here yet, so hurry up. Badoonch. Okay, this may be our shortest review yet. Okay, so since everybody kind of gave their synopsis, anyway, BK, tell me why you hate the film. You think it sucks. What's your overall thoughts, bro?
I think it had some good ideas. It was a weird way. There was like a whole bunch of filler in the beginning of the movie, and then the movie started.
Right.
It felt like, and it had some good ideas, but it wasn't cohesive. The storytelling wasn't really that good. The special effects were pretty decent, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little gruesome, which I actually like. That's cool. But everything else, like, we'll get into it in details. Just overall, it's like, But again, there's never really been a good video game movie adaptation, though.
Right.
Really. So now, if we judge it by other adaptations, I guess it's okay. If we're gonna judge it by other video game adaptations, it's all right.
Okay.
That's yeah.
Nate, man, what were your overall thoughts of the film?
You know, I think I've never played the video game, but if it was, they did it the same way. If these were like cutscenes in a
Mhm.
video game, it would have been okay. The main thing about the video game is you're interacting, you're playing it, right? And then you kind of include these bits of drama and dialogue. And so I think as a video game, I don't know how close it is to the video game, but I think that would have worked as but as I think translating it, it almost felt like they translated the
Mm.
cutscenes to a movie screen, and so I think there was some good ideas. It was mildly interesting overall, but I think it was hard to get on board with like some of the dialogue. The back and forth between Rose and her husband's story kind of felt disjointed, and it felt like they were trying to do something there, especially the way
Mhm.
it ended. But I'm not quite sure what they were trying to do there. It seemed like it could have been interesting. I almost want to hear an audio commentary, see what the idea and thinking behind it
Well,
was.
there is a sequel.
Um, but what this oh, okay, yeah, I think I saw that. Wasn't it like in 3D
Yeah.
too? But you know what's funny? I was just like thinking about it. This came out in
Mhm.
2006, right? I believe. And I was like, how does how does Sean Bean go from to being Lord of the Rings to this particular role? I don't know. It's a little bit sad because just they didn't give him much to deal with, and uh, anyway, it was okay though. But yeah, I think they had enough to go. They had enough that it could have been done better. But it's almost like they're like, well, the story's already written itself because it was a video game, so let's just make it work for film. Didn't quite work, but we'll get into
Of
that.
course. For me, my overall thoughts were probably completely different from everybody's. Did I think it was epic? No, no. It could have been a lot better. I played the video game, so what you guys are saying, as far as like Nate, he says it's just trying to be the video game. It is. It's trying really hard. Even the score is pretty much the soundtrack from the game itself, and that's the hard part when you're trying to adapt a video game experience into an hour and a half or 2 hours in film. It's very difficult to do because the audience's experience is interacting with it for like countless hours, not just that little small snippet that we get. For me, I actually enjoyed the film. I liked a lot of the things that they were trying to do. Alfredo pointed on that. There were some things that were really good. For me, maybe, you know what? I think in a sense, when I rewatched it, because I saw it before, I thought it was all right, and then I saw it again and I liked it a little bit better. It may be because it's a break from the whole MCU Marvel kind of cycle, and so when you get this little break of something that little bit different, I probably enjoyed it maybe a little more than I probably naturally would. But I did like some of the themes in the film. I liked the whole cult aspect of the Brethren, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But for me, I thought I wouldn't give it a lot of stars, but I wouldn't give it 0 stars, if that makes any sense. Okay, so I want to ask Alfredo. You ready, bro?
Uh, yeah,
Okay,
sure.
here we go. Should we try to interact with the supernatural? And what about the unseen realm of this whole world? Did you think about that theme at all while you were watching film? That's something I thought you might have kind of picked up on.
Um, Believe it or not, I wasn't so focused. I was more focused about how badly the storytelling is. But now that you bring it up,
Uh huh.
right? It is a again a warning when it comes to dabbling within the other realm. We'll get there soon enough when we transition, when we pass on. You know what I mean? It's like,
Hmm.
but until then, they stay over there, we stay over here, and that's it. The only person that we have communications with from that side is God.
Right.
And that's it. And there's a reason for that. God was very specific about us focusing on Him and not trying to, communicate with other entities that do exist
Hmm.
in this other realm. But again, you're dabbling with things that you don't really understand, right? This girl, she was in pain, she was betrayed, and because she was vulnerable, she tapped into the supernatural. And when you open doors to
Hmm.
the supernatural, it doesn't mean you know how to close them. You know what I
Right.
mean? And so with people who deal with this voodoo, santeria, any any type of exercise in which you try to reach out to the other realm, yeah, you might actually make contact, but when you're done, they're not,
It's not done.
right? So, yeah.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I really did enjoy about the film was, and I think I remember watching back in the day, the making of the film, and one of the things I really did enjoy was the transition from the regular world to the supernatural, hellish world. How everything started to decay on the walls, and everything became old and aged, and then that's when these spirits started opening up and interacting. For the time, for 2006, I really thought the effects were pretty good compared to now. No, we can see the obvious green screen, and all that. But for me at that time, I thought it was actually pretty good. Uh, but yeah, I really actually enjoyed that in between, and I think there were some really cool shots. One of the things that I did like was when anytime she walked by him in the same moment that he kind of had this feeling. I really enjoyed that wide pan shot when they kind of went when he was actually walking down that corridor and they were showing her walking down, but she was in the different realm and they intersected and he smelled her. I thought that was a really cool effect. I also like that for the part of the story and that he was still dealing with this stuff. Um, Michelle, what was your? I would ask this, Michelle. What was your favorite part of this film that you didn't like? Mm-hmm. Ah. Of course. Mm-hmm. It's interesting you say that. I mean, that was one of the darkest scenes in the film. But one thing that I did think about was a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's like you have these two aspects where the film tries to get the audience to kind of sympathize with the vengeance, right? It's like they want you to be happy that these people were being torn apart and tortured because they were so wicked, right? And they suffered because of their wickedness. And we'll talk a little bit about the cult in a second. But one of the things I definitely want people to make sure that they don't fall for, right? Because film again, it's a way to communicate the artist's thoughts and ideas and trying to convince the audience. I think it was almost pushing the whole idea in the somebody said no audio for us in the chat. Let me see. I don't know. Everything sounds like it's going good. Oh, they can't hear you, Michelle. Are you there? Yeah, I could hear you, but they're saying they can't hear her. I don't know. I don't. Oh, please. I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but let me see. I don't know. Say something, Michelle. Your audio. They're saying your audio is out. Let me see, let me do something real quick.
Is she muted?
No, she's not muted.
I can hear you.
All right. Let me see something. Let me do something real quick. Somebody talk about something.
Um, I mean, this. So right, the demon wants to attack the people in the church, but she tells the girl that their blind conviction prevents me from going in. And I'm like, is she just upset because they have conviction, O- or you know what I mean, or is it that they really do have a blind conviction and that somehow protects them which is a horrible statement to make because you're saying that you don't have to have that. It's like your faith doesn't have to be grounded in reality in order for it to be effective.
Right.
But Rose was an idiot
I,
who just
I,
who
I,
just
I think they're
recklessly
hearing you
drive a
now.
kid. Yeah, who just drives a kid out and like to a place you have no idea what you're doing, and you
Because she
haven't
had a
stopped
dream. Because she had a dream
any real.
about it.
That's what I'm saying. Like, cause a dream, like, ma'am, I really just wanted her to die in the first 20 minutes of the movie.
Oh wow. This is
Unfortunately,
getting dark.
the dumb lives long is what I'm finding out in real life and in this movie.
Mr. Phil Fox says kitchen doctrine strikes again.
Yeah, yeah. I'm always being silenced by SOCM.
Ah,
Thank you for recognizing that,
You know,
Phil.
I went through all that work to bring you back. You know, a part of me deep down inside wishes we would have just continued.
Legally, I'm always being silent.
Oh my goodness.
oh Lord.
Anywho. Okay. So one of the other aspects I definitely want to talk about the film was the clues that were being left behind in the film for this woman. For what is it? Rose? Is that the no?
Yeah, the
Who,
idiot
who,
mom,
yes,
Rose.
the idiot mom. Okay.
Yeah.
You know, the idiot mom. I don't even know why I call her idiot mom. I'm just repeating what you guys say. So anyway, Rose, she was getting these clues from her daughter. And immediately, one of the things I thought about was even though she left those clues from the supernatural realm, right, from another dimension, it really wasn't even her daughter that was leaving these clues. It was the other character, Alessa. But I also thought about, you know, all these clues were supposed to lead her to her daughter. And I'm thinking along the lines of, well, has the Lord left us any clues in this life to help lead us to eternal life? Is one of the things I was thinking about in the film. Of course, you know, my answer is going to be the scriptures. The scriptures are packed full of information and, in a sense, clues in this life so that we can actually be with the Lord for eternity. So that's one thing I thought about. Do you have a favorite character? Does anybody have a favorite character and why?
I like Sybil. Sybil, the police officer. She was
Andrea
about
from
that life.
Walking Dead.
Yeah, I know. When I was watching it, I was like, that looks just like Andrea from Walking Dead. She was terrible in The Walking Dead, and I wanted her to die sooner than she did in The
Oh my
Walking Dead.
goodness.
But she was amazing in this movie. And I was so glad to see her be fearless. Like because I would have left her there. Like I wouldn't have chased her. She would have just got away. She was driving like an idiot. And I was like, if she want to kill her and her kid, look, ain't got nothing to do with this. But her convictions, like going back to convictions, her conviction of what happened with that little boy caused her to not want to see the same thing happen to the little girl. So she puts her own self in harm's way in order to make sure that this little girl will be okay.
Right.
And then now she's stuck and doing all this other extra stuff, but she still, even with that, risk her life for them when she's like, you go and save your daughter, knowing good and well that these crazy people, the brethren called, is gonna probably harm her or the little girl. So she does put herself in harm's way a lot to protect Rose and Sharon. And I think that Anna, Alessa's real mom, she does a lot to try to even protect her too.
You know, that was actually my favorite character, Alessa's mother, because she was also leaving clues about this group, right? She was seen as the villain when you first see her. It's like, oh, this is just some crazy lady and she's just some bad, weird character. But as we discovered, she was an interesting character because of what she did, right? Like she was deceived by the cult. She was willing to sacrifice even her daughter, and she realized far too late when she did give her daughter over. And what I liked about her character was like the twisting of her mind from the cult leader, because remember it was in the bathroom where she tried to talk to Alessa's mother, and you see Alessa's mom just kind of struggling with the decision of whether or not her daughter's evil. And this is what I liked about the character, just because I thought she was very, very interesting. I like the actress who played her. I like the makeup they did for her. She played that character really well. But one of the things I definitely want to kind of highlight, you said a little bit of it was the brethren. We mentioned it a couple of times. Let me read this description of the cult, and then let's talk about the cult a little bit after I read the description. All right, it says the Brethren is a fanatical religious cult group based on the witch hunts of various past cultures, led by a high priestess named Christabella, and it is rooted in the town of Silent Hill, West Virginia. They are the main antagonists of the movie Silent Hill, based on the Silent Hill video game franchise. The cult believes that people deemed as witches or sinners must be quote unquote purified via an immolation ritual, ensuring them a cleansed existence to satisfying their God. After immolating a young girl in 1974, the Brethren's horrendous actions incited hatred and darkness within her heart, driving her to condemn all the cultists into a hellish dimension of Silent Hill for 30 years. So I want to get some of your thoughts. Nate, what was your thought about the cult? Was there anything about the cult that kind of stood out to you, or something that you, I guess, liked the way they portrayed as far as the cult? Let me just get your thoughts on that.
I thought they were kind of interesting because I was wondering if this was almost how you say it, like an exaggerated version of how some people see the church, like really judgmental, really I guess a word they might use is like religious and I don't know, dogmatic, and they, Rose almost seemed like the secular voice of reason or something like that. I think that's kind of what I felt when I was watching it. I'm like, oh, I'm wondering how many think this is like how they feel what the church is, and because you don't have they didn't really give much of a loving version, I guess, of people of faith. I mean, you kind of had the Catholic nun, which was more normal. She wasn't really at the orphanage, I guess, but she wasn't like she was still kind of just a person that was in fear, and so I think that's what I was thinking is that I bet for some people it would resonate with them, just saying, oh yeah, this is basically what the church is. I mean, it's an exaggerated version. They're not like a cult, but they have their beliefs, and they're very judgmental, and they don't these days don't go trying to purify people with rituals and whatnot, but it's they might point to, like, I don't know, church hurt stuff or whatever, not to downplay that, but that was kind of my thought. Was like, I wonder if there's like a bitterness behind the portrayal of the people of faith. But yeah, they seemed like they were like almost like evil Amish people or something.
evil Amish. That sounds like a movie, The Evil Amish. But it's interesting. One of the things I recognized, of course, with the whole cult ideology that they were teaching was a lot of it was the deification of a leader. When you looked into school, there was artwork, almost like this old Catholic artwork of the leader, and she was portrayed as God in the picture, in the artwork, and I thought that was interesting. But she's like you said earlier, I think it's more of a caricature of the church, right? Like this extreme version that's not biblical, but the artist or the director or the writers behind it, it almost felt like they were trying to say, this is the church, and the secular world, like you were saying with the young lady, she was the voice of reason, while all these crazy quote unquote Christians, even though in the film is never, I don't think Christ is mentioned other than the scripture that's in the Silent Hill sign. I think that happens about twice. But this whole thing of it's interesting because the description I read, it said their God. It didn't say the God of the Bible. It didn't say Jesus or anything like that. It was their God. But I think that there were, of course, underlying hints that, of course, they're talking about the Christian God to some degree. And one of the things that I thought was interesting, and this is going along the same lines as we've been talking about, is that cults have their secrets. And when they're exposed, they panic. And that's one of the things I noticed because we talked about what is it? We talked about Heaven's Gate. We talked about Keep Sweet, Pray, and Obey, the FLDS. And once their secrets were exposed, it's like they started to kind of like, oh, we got to fix it. We got to make sure we shut them down. So kind of like Michelle's favorite scene at the end when the lady is exposed for her wickedness and the fact that they're actually living in this kind of, they've already been in this torture and what is it? It's like almost limbo she's keeping them in. But either way, it's like when the lady realized that she was being exposed by the other lady, she began to try to chant or try to rile up the crowd saying blasphemer, so forth and so on, blasphemer. And it was taking the thought process out of the followers. Sometimes if you just repeat sentences or you repeat catchphrases, it automatically shuts down the brain and now you can't think straight. And so I thought, of course, of like, we've noticed it like the Hebrew Israelites, right? They're on the street and you're making sense and you're giving a good biblical argument. And all of a sudden the guy yells, oh no, that's right. And then everybody shuts down and stops thinking and then says, that's right. It's like a block. And she did that multiple times in the film. Especially when it came to Alessa. I don't know. What else did you guys notice as far as like the cult? Michelle, anything about the cult that stands out to you?
That I think they kind of knew the truth, but they just didn't want to accept it. Like that was like my biggest thing is like there's no way that you can't see what's actually happening to you. Like you guys not understanding you guys kind of living by yourself and nobody has went to seek any help or even tried to see if what was happening was true.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things like the cognitive dissonance and the disassociation to reality was one of the biggest themes to me from them because of that. So I would just say that's probably like my biggest thing. And plus, like they're like, oh, we have the right to judge. And they're a good example of why you need to have a good Bible teaching and to be solid in the faith and read the Bible in its context and study for yourself, because this is how a lot of cults rise up, because people don't actually study or read the Bible for themselves. So a lot of stuff she was saying, it wasn't even right. And then like when Rose, again, I didn't like Rose, but even when she was walking in, they was like hitting her and stuff. I'm like, what? Like, what is this going to accomplish? Like, I mean, what do you think this is going to stop her from going up there to Christabella? Like, none, that's not going to change anything. She's still going to do it, and y'all not even. And when they was doing it, it wasn't even like with any real force. Like nobody was really trying to stop her. I feel like it's a bunch of y'all in her. If y'all really wanted to stop her, y'all could. I digress. But yeah, so I think that is a lot of it. Like they don't have understanding of the Bible for themselves, because they would not have allowed her to rule the way she did.
Very, very true. It's interesting. One of the things I noticed is that the cults seem to execute their own version of righteousness. And in the film, the cop was actually speaking with the guy, Sean Bean, I forget the dad. And he told him, he says, there's many forms of justice. He said, there's man, God, and the devil. And he talks about this idea of justice coming from all three. Of course, and to some degree, I kind of understand what he was trying to say. You know, that men have their own idea of what's right and wrong. The devil has his own idea of what's right and wrong. And I'm going to say what's actually right and wrong is what God thinks, right? And what God says. But I think a lot of the time, like, for example, one of the statements, it says, Alessa, we don't say her name. Sinners deserve to lose their spawn. To me, that was like, it was soul crushing to some degree when I was listening to it, because they felt justified in destroying the daughter because in their mind, it was the right thing to do. But it wasn't the right thing according to scripture. It's not like they quoted a Bible verse, even though they quoted Bible verses in the film, but not in reference to that kind of what they did with her. But it was this whole idea that they deserve to lose their spawn. And it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think what's happened here is that she was born out of wedlock and they considered her to be a spawn of the devil. Was that the case, or am I
Yeah, she
missing
was
it?
born out of wedlock, so she already had that condemnation. Like she was a kid though. So my thing is, even if you were mad at her mom
Hmm.
for that, and I think also it's a trigger warning for people. This is going to be dealing with a R. Kelly kind of thing.
Okay.
But I think the janitor actually raped her too, if I'm remembering
Yes,
properly.
the young
And that's
girl.
after
Hmm.
that is when they decided to burn her. I'm like, so instead of getting the man who actually violated her, you go and burn her? like I
Right.
mean, in what world does that make sense? I'm glad you actually brought that up because I actually forgot about that part of it.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, like that is like you are condemning her for something she had no control over. Like both times, like you are mistreating her, and then in you mistreating her, you're also allowing children to mistreat her as well. So the kids are calling her witch and messing with her and mistreating her and being rude and disrespectful to her because the adults are doing it and
Right.
they're allowing this to happen because they don't care about this little girl either. And I'm like, if you are truly about judgment, you should have judged her father who made her mom an unwed mother. If you're going to judge her mother, if you want to be about judgment, judge those two. Don't judge her because she had nothing to do with it. And then instead of judging the janitor, again, you go to judge her. So it's like you have a, a, a very biased view of what judgment even looks like.
Hmm.
Because if you had a true view of judgment, it would not have went the way that it went. And I'm like, I'm confused. Like you just like she had a really deep hatred for this little girl, and it's like it was very unexplainable, like because all the things that you hate her for, she has no control over.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And that's the thing, right? Like she suffered, and we're gonna like toward the end, I'm gonna kind of touch more on those aspects of everything she went through and what it led to. But there was a part of the movie that actually reminded me of something Alfredo talked about a while back in one of his old shows, and it was this idea of othering. Um, and in the film, and I think I would like to hear Alfredo's thoughts on it when because of her mother, because of what the little girl went through, or at least the history of people kind of talking about what was going on, all of the kids started to mock her, calling her a witch, and she was othered. She was, oh, she's that other person. She's the outsider. And I think one of the things that's scary about cults is that they have the power to isolate you, and that in and of itself can be a form of judgment, even if it's unrighteous judgment. It's a judgment that makes you feel condemned. And this young girl at that young age, who doesn't really fully understand the concepts even that they're learning, is cut off from the only society or community that she knows. But Alfredo, when it comes to othering, I mean, are there any thoughts that came to your mind, or did it even appeal to you when you watched the film?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was the way that this woman, the cult leader, came into power
Hmm.
was by the usage of othering, because it it it, it appears as if she found the solution to everyone's problem. You want to know why your life is jacked up? It's because of this person over here, right? This is what Hitler did,
Hmm.
right, with the Jews. Like all these issues that we're having is based on the Jews. So, I have the final solution. So she did the same thing. And it was so powerful that even when she jacked it up, right? Because she is like, oh, I know why we got this problem, this little girl. We need to purge her. And when they burned her, the whole place collapsed. And all of a sudden, here comes the unseen realm running into your life. Like, and it seemed like in half-hour intervals every time they blew the siren.
Right.
And it's like, but she was still in power because she kept saying, "Well, it's because of them, because of her. Okay,
Hmm.
it's because this other girl." I'm like, well, oh, maybe it's you, But she was so good at pointing fingers and othering people.
Hmm.
That's how she kept her power, even after the fact that she basically brought hell on earth. So
And it's interesting you mentioned the whole idea of bringing hell on earth. She was the reason, and that's the thing. A lot of the cult leaders, when they're exposed, one of their reactions is to start judging harshly in order to kind of calm that the whole riot down. It's kind of like remember when we were talking about the FLDS and one of the things that happened is once it started to come out a little bit that they were, doing things and stuff like that, and all of a sudden he gets a prophecy, and they're supposed to escape, and all of a sudden they make this big migration, and it's just they panic, and that's what I want people to kind of pay attention to is that when cults begin to get exposed, they panic. But I love it when they panic because they make even more mistakes and they expose themselves even more. And you realize that cult leaders, when they start to lose control, they actually start to lose control of their own doctrine or and things like that. We even saw that with Heaven's Gate. Once they started to get questioned and pressed, their whole thing started to fall apart. It's like, well, I didn't know anything more about you. Remember we talked about, I didn't know anything more about you than when I walked in. What makes you different? What are you talking about? And I think if more people were able to ask that question, cults wouldn't thrive as much. But what ends up happening is because we don't know our own doctrine right, or we have a false understanding of what Christianity is, or maybe we just have our faiths. My family, my mom's Christian, so I'm Christian, and that kind of faith. Then when a cult comes and starts preaching some weird doctrine, there's nothing for you to do. Like, you don't know what to say. You don't even know where to begin. You don't even know how to ask the right questions because you never asked these questions before. And so, we have individuals who will say, oh, I used to be a Christian, but then I became a Hebrew Israelite. And it wasn't because of the evidence, right? The evidence is weak, right? The evidence is very weak. There is no biblical basis for that cult. But because individuals are unlearned in their own faith, it starts to sound good. It starts to, that sounds like that's right. They say it with such conviction. They believe what they say, so forth and so on. Obviously, they can't be wrong because they say it with so much gusto. You know what I mean? But that's the thing. False preachers and teachers aren't going to be very timid. I've never seen usually, not all the time, but usually they're not very timid. They're very boisterous and they speak very loudly because I think they're overcompensating, right, for the false doctrine that they have. There was a saying that kind of was repetitive in the film, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on it. It says, "Mother is God in the eyes of a child." Now, when I heard it, we can go in two directions with that. But before I go into it, Nate, Michelle, or Alfredo, when you heard that statement, and it was repeated at least 2 times in the film during very dramatic points, what were your thoughts about it? What came to mind?
Well, both ways of seeing it was actually on display in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because at one point it's like, a mother is everything, in the sense that that's a good thing. But then it was also used as a way to manipulate and control people.
Mm.
So both connotations actually were conveyed in the film.
Right. Nate, Michelle?
And so my reaction actually went to psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a thing called mothering the brain in psychology,
Okay.
where if we are devoid of love or we're devoid of certain aspects to help us develop properly and grow, they call it you're not properly being mothered. And it's not because only a mother can do it, but that's what it's actually called. So that's what I actually thought of. I thought more of a psychological view. Like if you're not mothered properly,
Mm.
it could cause, like we see a lot of people who are adults who don't like hugs, or they don't know how to handle confrontation properly. Um, they don't know how to deal with stress. And it's because a lot of those things are taught when we're very, very young. And we typically don't get out of them because we stay in those same type of environments. But that's what they typically call it. So that's why I actually thought of, like, when she was like, to a child, mother is God, I didn't think of like a religious aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
I thought more of a psychological aspect of it. Like, Alyssa's mom probably did love her, but he did very little to protect her.
Mm-hmm.
And in that, we see how Alyssa had all these issues come at her, and she was unprotected by her mother and in essence her father too, because nobody ever where's he at in all of this, nobody knows. um but she was very unprotected
She's
from
like
people who were
the
supposed
woman
to
caught in adultery. Where's the dude
exactly.
at?
And so it's like, where are you in all of this? So she
Hmm.
had to bear a lot of this stuff by herself. So that's kind of where I thought of, and I thought about how her mom just kind of like stood by. And one of the scenes, like Christabella's talking to her mom, and her mom just kind of like she makes herself small to not have to deal with Christabella's insults.
Hmm.
And even though her daughter is suffering, like in the background. So that's actually what I thought of when she made that statement.
Yeah, it was pretty bugged. I know for me, okay, so when I heard the two terms, right? Well, the one term, and I thought two ways I should say about it. You know, mother, is God in the eyes of a child. You can think about it from the perspective of, from a child's perspective who may not grasp the concept of God. The mother is the ultimate authority in their life, or the father, right? Is the ultimate authority in their life. So, in that sense, you can kind of grasp this idea of like the parent being like the God. And this is even more of an important thing of why parents should be good image bearers, because they are reflecting God to the child. And so I thought about it from that perspective. And so one of the things that came to my mind was when her mother gave her away to be burned, that young girl now views God as an evil character, a character who is not loving, not caring, not self-sacrificial. Because remember, the child's view of the mom is God. If that parent is a bad reflector or image bearer, then that child is going to understand God wrongfully. At least that's one of the things I thought about. And of course, you could think about the idolatrous aspect where there are some kids who probably idolize their parents or hold them in a higher position than God. And again, this is why it's so important for children, well, for parents to make sure that, yes, you are the authority over your kids. The Lord put you there, but you are not over God. Which could make it a little difficult. Like I just thought about it now. It could make it a little difficult for kids who become, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of mesmerized by their parents. Let's say they have feelings of, I think God is right based on scripture, but my mom said this, so I'm going to believe her instead. Right. And that's holding your parents up in a higher position than they should be. At least those are some of my thoughts. Nate, as far as like uh, the mother being God in the eyes of the child, what were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, my initial thought was, I heard that and I was like, wait, what did you say? Because I'm thinking like, oh, you're making somebody else God.
Uh-huh.
I was like, okay, let's think about it a little bit. I was like, okay, in the eyes of a child. So they're saying that from the child's perspective, they're not
Mm-hmm.
saying necessarily that the mother is God. Okay, that actually I can see how they would say that, right?
Right.
Because for the child, the mother is everything. It's the protector, the provider, the nurturer, and especially for a young child, it's the most immediate, most tangible person who's going to be all these things to take care of them. And so I can kind of see how that could be. Um, so from that perspective, I'm like, okay, that actually kind of makes sense
Mm-hmm.
that a child uh, uh, perspective perception of their mother could be like how one might perceive God. And I'm kind of, I think I was kind of thinking right now, it's like, and I think you kind of touched on this, SOC. It's the a mother, I think, reflect who God is, or an idea of who God is to their child in the way they act. If they are being led by God's love in the way that they love their child, they might, the child's perception of God is going to be, of who somebody who's a protector, who's supposed to be taking care of them. It's going to be one way. If like and if if they're not taking care of them, or if they're not loving them the way they should, then their idea of God is going to be different. And it makes me think of when Jesus said, basically the passage about taking care of the least of these, right? It's like, well, when did we do all these? When did we feed you? Or when did we clothe you when you were naked? When did we feed you when you're hungry?
Oh,
It's like
good
when you
point.
did, what you did to the least of these. And so it's like, okay, I can kind of see how you might make some parallels, or again, seeing the reflection. And so that's where my mind went just now. And but I think the other thing was, again, I think I was thinking about this when I was watching the film. Again, back to how the cult might represent how people view the church, and the whole situation kind of being a sort of hell for. I mean, in a way, it was kind of a hell for the. Well, it was hell, I guess, for Sharon, in a way, when she was separated from Rose. And then at the end, what happens is and I still quite understand. I guess they're still in another realm or something, but they're back at the house, which I guess it represents something, a safe place, represents home. But it's just her. It's just Rose and Sharon, and it's like, is that her heaven then? Just being with the mom without Sean Bean, is that taking that to another level? It's like, okay, she's now with God, just God, Sharon. And I don't know if that was meant if that's what that was meant to be, but then it goes back to my original thought. It's like, wait, no, what are you saying again? Are you trying to, like you said, idolize mom? So I was like, maybe I was right the whole time.
Right.
But there, yeah, no, that was kind of an interesting a line that did make me think a little bit. So yeah, that I actually be curious to see if they ever expounded on what the idea behind that was.
Yeah. I mean, when I first saw the film, now, of course, there's a part 2, but we're not talking about part 2. But, when I look at it, the first thing I think is, okay, they're in the afterlife, wherever that is, or at least however the director kind of created this extra dimension or afterlife. But if I'm correct, I could be wrong, but if I'm correct, I think in the next film, she tries to communicate with him again or something like that. So I don't know if this is an afterlife or maybe a place of limbo to some degree, where, okay, now they're no longer in the real world where they were, and now they're no longer in kind of like Hades or that world, that underworld. Now they're kind of in the middle, right? Because those two dimensions still exist even in the next film. So it could be like a sort of limbo. At least that's what I'm thinking of.
I do think it's a limbo, and I only say that because you remember when you brought up how when she was walking down a hall and he smelled her?
Yes.
When the dad gets up, the door is open. And then you see it cuts to them walking up the steps. So it would seem like they're still like in another world that can still interact with reality.
Right.
Not necessarily heaven.
You're right. And here's the thing that I think about, because this film, remember, every director and writer has a reason and purpose. Now, this may not be the reason and purpose that the director is doing this or the writer, but films like this open people up to wanting to communicate with spirits. I think films like this, not only this one, but other films that go along this genre of talking to the dead loved ones and things like that. And I think a film like this can be dangerous in the sense that, let's say a person let's say somebody just lost their mom, right? It's tragic. They just lost, and then they watch this film. They're already susceptible because they're hurt. They're feeling this pain. And they're like, I wonder if I could communicate. Like, it opens that dialogue. Now, scripture tells us not to communicate with the dead. Number one, you're not communicating with your mom. You're not communicating because you can't. But there are other spirits that could imitate or kind of make you feel like you're talking to your mom. And then you start taking the communication of demons and so forth and so on. This is why God, like Alfredo was saying earlier, The unseen realm is a realm we do not understand and fully grasp. We can't quantify it. We can't explain it in every little aspect. God can, but even in God's wisdom, he says, even though I can, you shouldn't even have nothing to do with it because you don't even know what you're doing. And you don't know what you're going to open yourself up to. I mean, we can't even tell you when we're communicating with angels, because even in scripture it says sometimes if you entertain strangers, you entertain angels unaware. So you don't really grasp this concept, but it is I would say a foothold, right? In the same way that we could look at different films that are scary and they talk about Ouija boards, right? It could open somebody's thought or give them the appearance that, hey, this is possible. Why don't you give it a try? Do you guys get that from this film? Like that's possible for people to interpret it that way?
I could see that and I could see the dad actually opening himself up to that, just because of how he was running around the town trying to find his family. He doesn't know where his wife is at. He doesn't know where his daughter is at. He's not getting the help that he feels that he should be getting. And then to like have the door open, I think that could be a possibility for him, just because the state of mind that he's in.
But that's great. Like, do you think Satan would take an opportunity like that to deceive somebody into that? Yeah, see, and that's where I kind of wanted to jump into, is because it takes the opportunity of pain, right? The opportunity of hurt. And I'm going to talk about a very specific scene in a second. But Alfredo, any thoughts about anything so far? Something maybe we didn't bring up that, caught your attention in the film?
Yeah, they're very much like, what's the term? Actually, CMB can help me with this. They were like Millerites.
Okay.
There was a form of Millerism, and she definitely had oh my gosh, what's her name?
You talking about the main
Yes.
character?
Christabella or Rose or
No,
Sharon?
the SDA person.
Ellen G. White.
Oh, she had serious e.g. the vibes.
Oh,
She kind of
yeah.
looked like her a little bit, like that whole Puritan type
Yeah.
thing, So I'm like, oh, okay, I see what you're doing here. You know what I mean?
So you're saying that lady was the Ellen G. White of Silent Hill?
Basically, yeah.
Oh man, that's a good point, right? Of course, I didn't think about Ellen G. White, but now that you say it, it's like, yeah, I can kind of see that there, definitely. Yeah, that whole Puritan look. Okay, so the scene that I wanted to talk about as we lead into the end of this review is the scene where Alessa. Now, everything that we've talked about as far as what Alessa went through, being othered, being burned alive at the stake, in a sense. Well, literally burned alive at a stake. No, she was almost like fried on that iron symbol, right? Yeah, so she was fried on that iron symbol, and as a result, the symbol and her tilted over, it clicked and set the whole thing on fire. But anyway, Alessa, had suffered all of these things. And there's something in the film that I want people to pay attention to specifically if you do watch this film, and that's toward the end when this quote-unquote demon, which is going to be revealed as Satan in the film, when that demon enters into Alessa's life. So when I was listening to it, I had to rewind it a few times so I can get the quote correctly. So basically what's happening is when Rose enters the room where Alessa is, this demon starts to communicate with her everything Alessa went through, kind of the revealing of the truth of everything that happened in Silent Hill as it pertained to the cult. And in that phrase, when this demon was manifesting itself as the little girl, which is something else that we can talk about, it says, Alessa was so lonely and hurt and scared. They should have known better than to hurt her so badly. When you're hurt and scared for so long, fear and pain turn to hate, and the hate starts to change the world that she knew. That's when I came. See, that was a creepy line, because I thought immediately about, examples of, let's say, parents going through these traumatic experiences. I can say that personally when my mom went through a traumatic experience and her hurt and pain, that's when Satan came with a false doctrine. And so when I listened to that, it was in that pain, in that hurt, that Satan came. Now, the reason why I say that this character is Satan is because, you know, she said, "What's your name?" He says, "Well, I'm known by many names." And so immediately I'm thinking like, you know, the Greek name for Satan and so forth and so on, and different, you know, legion. And so, well, you know, you have all these demonic spirits you can think of, but it's Satan, and Satan is revealing himself as this little girl, or as the evil manifestation of Alessa. But Alessa, in her darkness, she was in the hospital. She was all burnt alive. She was at her weakest moment. And that's when the character said, "That's when I came." So what I'm saying is Satan comes in weakness. Satan comes when you're broken or hurt the most. He even tried to do that with Jesus, right? Jesus fasted, right? He didn't come to him the first day when he was okay. Like, you know, like it was after 40 days and 40 nights of fasting. And then he comes to try to deceive Christ. And so that for me was one of the most standout scenes that I think that I would use as an opportunity to teach somebody about weakness, especially in a cult, right? Because in that cult, she was cast out, she was thrown off, she was burned alive, she had been abused by that male. All of these traumatic experiences compounded on one another. And then that's when the Satan appears and says, "That's when I came," in that moment. And then offered that little girl the opportunity to seek vengeance and to kill everybody and so forth and so on. And so I want to get your thoughts on that, whether you noticed it the first time or not. What do you guys think about that scene? And can you draw a parallel to individuals that maybe you've known who've been church hurt or hurt in life that will cause them to want to go down the path of darkness? I want to hear your thoughts on that. Whoever can go first.
I mean, us being urban apologists, right? We have a very niche ministry, and we are defending against very specific types of heretical doctrine. And whether it's, you know, Hebrew Israelism, Nation of God and Herbs, the conscious community, and the variations within that thing. The one thing that's the common thread that I think that helps, that lures people in and keep them in, is hatred. It is anger. You know, you said earlier, you know, it's like a lot. The doctrine is paper thin. You know, we've all done videos about, you know, debunking many aspects of Hebrew Israelism,
Mm-hmm.
right? We made it very clear to everyone the fallaciousness of the entire worldview, but yet people are running in droves to it. Why? Hatred. It fuels. It makes you feel alive. You know, all your nerve endings are now, you know, on fire, like, and it gives you a false sense of feeling alive. You know, and that's the thing. The anger. It was the anger that kept her physically alive, because there's no way she could have survived that for that long.
Mm-hmm.
But the anger, like, she was alive because she wanted revenge, and she was talking Satan's language. That's why Satan showed up. Like, oh well, if that's what you want, you know, I could grant you the ability. And it's funny, and there's hatred all the way around, because you have the little girl. Well, you have the cult who hated her
Mm-hmm.
and did what they did to her because of their hate, and now that hate spawned a hatred that was supernatural, and now this hate is coming back to it's the unpaid bill of what the cult did to her.
Mm.
So you have these two rival forms of hatred duking it out, you know, and it shows you that yes, hatred is powerful, but when the bill comes due, it's something else. So
Yeah. You know, it was, you know, when I watched that scene, and in a sense, I put myself into her shoes. Like, how would, like, just naturally, not saying everybody would go along with that, but if you were in that position, you had no background of God, you don't know Christ, you just know this cult, and you're an individual who was placed in that position, And then this spirit comes to you, either dressed as an angel of light or whatever disguise it comes in, and offers you the opportunity to get vengeance. Remember, you're not thinking in a Christ like you're a secular person in the world under a cult. I can see how somebody can fall for that and go for it and then become enamored with the power and the rage. Because when that girl was given the ability to just cut these people up, you saw that she smiled. Like she was happy to do it. And this is where I said that films like this can actually give you the wrong idea of what justice is. Because that sense of justice is nowhere, it should be in no one's hands. Only God. This is why God tells us that vengeance is his, says the Lord, right? It's not ours. It's not for us to dish out this judgment. And so I think that's something that kind of stands out to me. Nate and Michelle, as far as like that Satan coming to her in her weakness, or any thoughts that maybe we didn't talk about. I guess let's just make this our final thoughts. Michelle, any final thoughts about the film, or did you want to talk on that topic?
I would just say that our enemy walks around like a roaring lion seeking who may devour. So we have to be on guard, even as Christians, that we are not opening ourselves up to stuff that we can't control. We can only control our actions. We can't control the consequences of those actions. And my final thoughts is um, it was a decent movie. I mean, it's not nothing to write home about. And listening to how, like, I knew you would like this movie after watching it, because I realized if I don't like something, Jordan probably likes it. Um, and I've come to that realization. But like listening to you talk, some of the points that you brought up was some of the points that I did like of the movie. I think it had the potential to be great. It just didn't have the proper execution. And it's come from somebody who loves horror films. Like I love horror movies. Um, I will say I actually like the nurses. Like they're those nurses was pretty dope. I know it's probably not the focus of the movie, but those nurses were pretty dope. And we're not an island unto ourselves. What we do affects other people. Like we see that throughout this whole movie.
Very, very good point, sis.
Killed
I'm
off
glad
the
you brought
whole
that
town.
up.
Alessa's mom not protecting her caused all of this, this demon to come, or the Satan to come into her daughter. Rose running off and doing whatever she was doing put Sharon, who was the good part of Alessa, it put her in danger, and she was able to merge back with her. Like you see the police officer, he was like some judgment is he go and what the different judgments are, then he show his hands. Like we see that he's like his dad died and all this because it's fire, because this one person wanted to play God. So our actions do not just affect us. They can negatively or positively affect other people. So as we live our lives as Christians, we need to be very mindful of how our actions affect other people, because we don't want little Alessas running around and then they're damaged, and now their damage is causing other people to be hurt or, led astray or, feeling broken and alone. So just that's the one thing I will say, like Sharon and Rose and all her stupidity. I will say that she was very gung ho to fight for her daughter. And even though and Sharon was adopted, and even though that wasn't her natural daughter, she still loved her with that same kind of love that we will have. So just like we're children of God and we're adopted in, God still has that same kind of love and care for us that she had for Sharon. So those are kind of like my takeaways from the movie.
Wow, those are really good takeaways, and I'm glad you brought all that up, because it's great in that you brought up that whole idea of all these little Alessas running around, because we're looking at a film and we think, oh, those are just characters in a movie, but of course, on Real Reviews, we're highly intelligent individuals who pick out details that probably people won't even think about. And that's, I think, a great point to pull out for other people to grasp, is that individuals like that are hurt. There are people who are in pain. And, Satan will come to them in their pain and deceive them. And so thank you so much, Michelle, for bringing that up. Nate, Any final thoughts about the film? Anything that maybe we didn't talk about that you wanted to make sure you spoke on?
Yeah, I mean, jumping off of that whole idea of Satan coming to you, in your pain, it makes me think of, I don't think the demon in this story had. I don't think there's any suggestion that they have any influence behind the cult,
Mm-hmm.
but I could almost see, uh, an idea that one could implement where the demon does what they do to cause the cult to do what they did to the girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when, because the I guess the girl being at her lowest point, being angry, that's when the demon comes in,
Right.
and um and through that, they're able to use the girl to end up destroying the cult. So it it's and I feel like that's sort of a parallel, that model anyway is a kind of a parallel to what I feel like I see it seems like Satan's doing with, real world cults,
Mm-hmm.
where you have them hurt within the cult, you have them come out, but now they're already damaged because of what happened in the cult, and so then they're already, Satan takes that opportunity and maybe damages them to make them uh, uh, spokespersons against any kind of spiritual belief altogether, or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, right? And so I think there's a sort of divide and conquer kind of, idea that you can see that Satan will often implement. So it's weird because he's on both sides. He's using both sides to kind of destroy each other.
Mm.
Um, and it's and I think that's kind of, and I always talk about tribalism. I think that's kind of the idea. I think tribalism is fueled by, a lot of times by, Satan, where you just, even within the only church, you have people, who say they're Christian, but then they're fighting on opposite sides of the political spectrum, or something like that. It's almost like being in a political cult, or, um, again, I think back to like Star Wars, where in the prequel era, where you got all these separatists leaving the Republic because they're disillusioned, and it's because Palpatine is sort of uh, moving things behind the scenes to make them separate from themselves, coming against the Republic,
Mm-hmm.
and they're almost like I don't want to call them a cult necessarily, but it's almost like a cult, and then they end up getting destroyed in their own cult that by Palpatine, that Palpatine helped um, form. And so it's like, that's all these groups and solutions that we go to, that we think are the answer to the hurt, is more like, I think, Satan creating, or doing things to cause the hurt, so that he leads you to him as a solution, and you don't even realize it, and then you just uses you to destroy each other. And that's kind of what I was thinking. It's like, oh, that's could be sort of what's happening, here, except that maybe he wasn't behind the cult, but you see that demon taking advantage of, again, of the girl, or her pain. And so that's one parallel that I was thinking of. And then, but the other side of it also, that was interesting to me, was, in a way, that entity that I guess is kind of a Satan character was almost a good guy, or the hero, a hero of sorts. It allowed justice within the realm of justice, in a way, to be exacted against the cult. It didn't. I guess ultimately they're making Sharon, or no, Rose out to be the ultimate hero, but it didn't really. Maybe I'm missing it, but it didn't feel like, the demon was quite as bad as it should have been, because
Right.
it allowed Sharon to be saved.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could argue that they were using her to ultimately get to the cult and destroy them. But that was the kind of other thing, from just, again, going back to the whole idea of the cult representing, maybe in some people's mind, the church, and then now you have so everyone, obviously you're watching this, you're thinking, oh, these cult people are the bad people. If it's also resonating with you, the idea that they represent the church, then how is it going to resonate with you when you have this dark entity coming in and exacting judgment or justice on the church? I feel like it can almost make you look at darkness in a different way and be a little bit more sympathetic to it, thinking that darkness, what we call darkness, may not be as bad as the church makes it out to be, because the cult demonized the demon, I guess, or they represented it as the darkness that we need to flee and avoid. But in the film, it's what allowed Sharon to be reunited with Rose, and it's like that's kind of messed up in a way, great. I'm not going to support like the way that they were mutilated, but I'm sure it's supposed to be satisfying. I think that was pretty creepy, but I think it's just funny. It's just funny that in a way the demon wasn't it was almost like a dark angel or something. And so I think that there's a subtle hint there that may be a little bit dangerous as well. But yeah, so that's just kind of what I took away from it. It was so as far as final thoughts, it wasn't like the worst film ever. There were some interesting thoughts. Michelle kind of said it. The execution was off. That's what I always say, right? But I feel like they could have taken what they had and actually made something really interesting. I know we haven't really been doing stars this season, but I would probably give it a 2.5, just because there is something there. I thought the character of I think the main cult lady, I think that was Alice Krige, I believe. And so it was interesting seeing just her, and kind of you alluded to this, SOC, as her being this leader that sort of took over and controlled all these the cult members, and was able to lead them to do what they want, kind of like being drones. And that was kind of an interesting idea, but I kind of liked it better the first time when I saw it in Star Trek First Contact, when Alice Krige was the Borg queen controlling all the Borg. So they're kind of stealing from Star Trek. I'm sorry, but 2 out of 5 stars.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair rating. I would agree in 2.5. I think I would agree to the 2.5 range. 3 is usually it's a really good movie, but it was lacking in a lot of areas, at least for me, I think. 2.5 is it wasn't horrible. I mean, well, it wasn't a 0, but it's also not a great film. Alfredo, final thoughts, man, about anything in the film that maybe we didn't mention, or just what you thought about it overall. And I know you're going to give this movie 5 stars, Alfredo. I know you are. Or maybe he won't. He's quiet. Maybe he's doing something. Let me see. Okay, so I'll give my final thoughts. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good film. I thought it had some redeeming qualities, or at least maybe from a Christian perspective. I think it had a lot to talk about as it pertained to film and things like that. So I enjoyed it. So with that said, let me give my outro. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this film. If you didn't, you gave it 2.5 like the rest of us did, or didn't like it, that's okay. But it gave us a lot of cool things to talk about. If there is a film out there that you want us to speak on, and you believe it has a lot of really good themes and topics that we can pull from, make sure you leave it in the comment section below. So with that said, I want to thank you all for being here and joining us on Real Reviews. Again, if you want us to talk about a certain film, just leave it in the comment section below. I want to thank you for being here. Of course, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And also, just really quickly, Thursday is going to be a really cool show. Me and Michelle Turner are going to have a conversation about Menace to Society. Now, if any of you have seen Menace to Society, you know there are a lot of good topics and themes in that film. So me and Michelle, this Thursday at around 9 p.m., we're going to be talking about that film. So make sure you like, share, subscribe, click the notification bell so you know when we go live and you're alerted. So make sure you guys do that. So with that said, I want to say God bless you guys. Take care, follow Christ, and don't let films deceive you. Peace out. Later.